What's up guys, I'm Tony Wodarck. I'm a photographer out of Southern California. We're in the middle of a multi-video series about how to shoot film. I've showed you how to find your film camera, how to choose your film, how to meter. Today we're gonna be talking about pushing film. And I get tons of questions about pushing film, and I totally understand it gets a little confusing. So I'm gonna try to break this down as simple as possible. Okay, let's go around Portra 400 because that's what I use the most. 90%, 95% of my work is Portra 400. Portra 400. So if you watched my last video about how to meter, you know that I like to shoot Portra 400 at 320 ISO. So that means I like to overexpose Portra 400 by half a stop. So you know that I like to shoot Portra 400 at 320 ISO. So if you want to push film a stop, you can push film 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops. I don't ever push film 2 or 3 stops. You can if you really need to. I push black and white film 2 stops, but when you start to push into the 2 and 3 stops, you get these color shifts and it can get a little wonky sometimes. So I recommend if you're gonna push film, at least try just pushing film 1 stop at first. So what that means is you're gonna meter the film a certain way, shoot the whole roll. You have to push the entire roll. I get that question a lot. If you're gonna push it, can you push parts or whatever? You have to push the entire roll. A lot of people ask, if I shoot a roll of Portra 400 at 200 ISO, is that pushing it to stop? If I shoot it at 800 ISO, is that pushing it to stop? No. How you meter the film is not pushing or pulling the film. That happens at the lab. So we're gonna rate the film in a certain way, and I'll get into that. But what's gonna happen is you're gonna give it to the lab, and I write +1 on here. And a lot of films have like a little checkbox. This one doesn't, but it says notes, and you can just put +1. And so when I give it to Goodman Film Lab, who I use in Irvine, or most film labs that allow pushing, what they're gonna do is they're gonna take this roll and they're gonna leave it in the developer longer. So they have all these settings in temperature and time and all of that stuff to figure out how much to leave it in for Portra 400. They're gonna leave that longer, and what that does is it helps bring out the highlights more, and it gives more contrast and more saturation to your final photos. So that's why I love pushing film, is because I love a lot of contrast and good saturation in my images. And so when I push film, it gets me really close to the end result that I want straight from the lab. So, like I said, I like to shoot Portra 400 at 320 ISO. So if we underexpose it 1 stop, that would be 640 ISO. So I meter the roll at 640 ISO. I shoot the entire thing. I give it to the lab. I put +1 on it. They push it a stop. And in theory, it gets me to 320 ISO. And that'd be pushing it 1 stop. You can also shoot it at 800 ISO. And push it 1 stop. You could shoot it at 1000 or 1600 ISO and push it 2 stops. That's up to you. But if I was gonna try pushing film for the first time, and I think it gets people a little nervous because they think it's gonna be crazy results, it's not gonna be that big of a difference in results. I would rate Portra 400 at 640 ISO, meaning on your light meter, put 640 ISO, meter the entire roll at 640 ISO, put +1 on it, give it to your lab and tell them to push it 1 stop, and check out the results and see what you think. That's pushing film. A lot of people talk about pulling film, and that's basically the opposite. It's if you overexpose the film, they leave it in the developer shorter, and that gives you less contrast. I don't really know what it does to saturation, but I don't really know anyone that pulls film. Film handles overexposure so well that I don't think pulling film makes a lot of sense. So I wouldn't recommend personally pulling film. I would just recommend pushing film. And the reasons for pushing film, the reason that I like is because it gives me more contrast and saturation. Another great benefit of pushing film is you can shoot in lower light. Like if I was gonna shoot in this light here, I would have to shoot at 2.0 at 1/30th of a second at 400 ISO. But if I went to 640, now all of a sudden I'm shooting at 2.0 with 1/60th of a second. And 1/60th of a second I can hand hold with an SLR with a 50mm lens. So 1/60th of a second I feel a lot more comfortable with. And so I can change mine to 160. I have that at 640. and then I can shoot at 2.0 and I can get some portraits handheld, and then I'll push to stop at the lab and I'm really gonna like the results. And so it just allows you to shoot in a little bit less light. I hope that explains pushing film. I really don't, maybe you have more questions. I don't really know. I get a ton of questions and I tried to cover all of those in this video, but if you have more, I would love to help you understand pushing film more. I'm gonna show you some examples of that in this video, so hopefully that helps. But yeah, make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow me at Tony Wodarck on Instagram, drop your comments below. I'm excited to be doing this series with you and I hope you're enjoying it. Thanks.